continuing controversy over the question of reparations for slavery has taken another turn, with the former Conservative MP and Liberal Democrat MP Antoinette Sandbach objecting to being named as the descendant of a Liverpool merchant who had a stake in plantations in the West Indies. He was part of a company compensated for more than 600 slaves after abolition. Antoinette Sandbach argues that there's no public interest in identifying in research by the Cambridge academic, poet and author Malik Al Nasir, during which he discovered links to Sandbach's tins to the slave Africans, but also links to the slave owners. Antoinette Sandbach supports Malik Al Nasir's research, but accuses him of singling her out. Well, he is here, and we're also joined by the historian, Professor Goldman, the former director of the Institute of Historical Research, who's taught the history of American slavery. Good evening to both of you. Malik Al Nasir, now, why in the TED Talk, not your broader research, but why in the TEDx talk that you did you single out Antoinette Sandbach? Because what she says is that actually it's compromised her personal safety.
Well, good evening and thanks for having me on the show. Firstly, I'd like to say that Antoinette Sandbach was not singled out. This is a unilateral declaration that she's made. She was a footnote in a TED talk that was actually about Samuel Sandbach, her ancestor, the slave trader. What was being demonstrated was the mercantile influence of this dynasty of sugar barons and slave traders from that period, known as Sandbach's Tinny & Co., of which she is a direct descendant of one of the founding partners, Samuel Sandbach. And they have many individuals within the family who have held public office, including Prime Minister William Ewart Gladstone and his father, Sir John Gladstone, who was one of the biggest slave owners and also monopolised much of the sugar industry along with Sandbach's Tinny and Demerara. So I've done talks on a number of occasions where I've identified multiple political figures within this family. I did a whole talk at Cambridge University where I focused on John Abraham Tinny MP. So there's been a whole, this is not something which was targeted at Antoinette Sandbach. She's taken umbrage to this and, made it this kind of unilateral declaration that because she was mentioned as a footnote in the TED talk, that somehow she was targeted, and that's just absolutely not the case.
Professor Goldman, all research presumably is legitimate, and what Malik Al Nasir is saying is that Antoinette Sandbach was a footnote. However, I suppose when you're a TEDx talk online, the footnote can be actually witnessed by millions. Was it legitimate, or do you think she is right to say that she feels that it wasn't a matter for public discourse?
Well, first of all, I think I want to say how much I admire research into the history of slavery, such as Matt's doing, and long may that continue. But the question really is why it would be necessary to name a living person. There are plenty of ways of anonymising individuals who come up in research. Either their evidence is given anonymously or their names are left out. And there may well be a dynasty of figures from the 18th century onwards who Malik has been studying. But that point can be made very easily without actually naming a living person. And possibly bringing them into harm's way.
Malik Al Nasir, Antoinette Sandbach says that she supports your research. She abhors slavery, but she says that she had a right to privacy and there's no public interest in actually naming her. Do you accept that argument?
Well, that argument was not made to me. That argument was made to University of Cambridge when she initially approached my supervisor and complained. It wasn't just that she was also arguing that the picture that I used of Samuel Sandbach was not Samuel Sandbach, when in fact it was, and she was really questioning the veracity of my research. So there were a number of things that I had to respond to my supervisor, which I did to his satisfaction. But then she made a formal complaint on the grounds of GDPR, which went to the Data Compliance Department and had nothing to do with me.
Well, and that is something I know that you are taking up and pursuing. On the broader
I'm not taking that up and pursuing that at all. That was pursued by Cambridge University.
By Cambridge, sorry.
I was brought into that only at the point when she intimated that she was going to potentially issue legal action against Cambridge and against me. At that point, they brought me into that discussion.
Right.
Prior to that, it was between her and
sorry to interrupt, but can I just turn to Professor Goldman? You know, it seems now that at the moment we are actually in an unprecedented period where we interrogate both the responsibility and reparations for slavery. We've had, you know, Lord Trevelyan is leading the way in that. You know, you talk about Malik, you talk about the Gladstone family and so forth. That there is an acknowledgement of past wrongs. What do you think, Lawrence Goldman, about the idea that there should be reparation, or indeed is that not the way of actually dealing with this?
Well, I'm not quite sure that that is the issue. I mean, I don't know. If that is the issue, then there's
obviously... But broadly, that is one of the big conversations just now.
Okay, but I mean, there may well be a problem in a sense where Malik's work in an academic context is also being mixed with, as it were, Malik's more political advocacy. I don't know, I'm not, you know, as it were, privy to his work, but clearly there is academic history, which we definitely need done, which establishes the history. And then there is political advocacy, and Malik can do both. All historians and political figures and writers can do both, but it's the mixture of the two in the thesis that is a problem. It, as it were, defy academic conventions. If, as it were, this academic work is being mixed with a claim, as it were, for reparations and asking Antoinette Sandbach to make such reparations, then that raises questions about a doctoral thesis, which should be a pure piece of...
But I don't think, let me just ask Malik that. Are you actually more broadly in favour of reparations?
Well, just to respond to that allegation that was made by your other guest, that's the first time I've ever heard that. So, you know, there's for him to intimate that there's somehow I'm mixing reparations and political advocacy with the content of my thesis when he hasn't seen my thesis and he's already said he's unfamiliar with my work, I think is disingenuous. I am not working on the issue of reparations within the context of my thesis. My thesis is about mercantile hegemony in the latter days of British slavery and its case study of Sandbach's Tinny. And that's what I'm looking at, and it's based on a methodological approach, which is a mixture of genealogy and also participatory action research, which is working towards doing public engagement around the decolonisation of these archives and ways to bring these archival collections together in order to make them accessible for researchers to be able to use those data sets. And that's what I'm doing. So I don't know where your other guest got that notion from. But that was an assumption, and for someone who is, you know, so high up in the IHS, I would have expected him to possibly qualify that before he made such an allegation.
A very brief response, Professor Goodwin.
Well, I'm awfully sorry if I've in any way offended Malik. I've been called upon to make some comments, and from the BBC's account on the website, it's simply not altogether clear what's going on. I would simply ask, is it right necessary to name someone who's made it very clear that she feels her privacy is being invaded?
Thank you both very much indeed for coming on tonight.
Thank you.